and welcome to episode 3 of Grip It and Rip It. I guess it's our marketing podcast here. I wanted to take this episode to bring on our director of paid social, who you all probably recognize from Twitter or LinkedIn or any of the many media buying groups that you're probably in. Phil Keel, who is in charge of all of our paid social here at Tycoon. Phil, welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
It felt like a good time to have you on. I think the story, the narrative that everyone is talking about on Twitter anyway, and I will always call it Twitter, is Andromeda, though I guess we're also moving into GEM for 2026. So want to have you on and talk a little bit about Andromeda, why it's not actually new, what it actually is and isn't, and then maybe hit us with some GEM insights if you got those too.
I mean, yeah, you've thrown that curveball at me. I need to do a bit more homework on that one. I know the acronym. I think the Andromeda thing is quite interesting because I think the reason why it's popular now is because we're almost at this sort of like crescendo, which is a big word, of like year-long activity from Meta paired with market performance, consumer, disposable income, you know, the cash in the wallet, and then also engagement content on Twitter and LinkedIn and Slack and whatever group. And I think part of the reason why we're hearing a hell of a lot more about it right now is because of that last piece around it gets good clicks. And when performance is down because of macro economic impact potentially, we always like to point our finger at the platform when it could actually be something else. Maybe that topic is for a different episode.
I mean, I think you bring up a good point, which is anytime performance is down, we want to blame Meta. We want to find a problem that is controllable. And, oh, hey, Andromeda, your creative isn't diverse enough, whatever. Like, that's kind of an easy thing to point at. Even though it has been, and you can go further into details on it. Like, probably been live since, and it's rolled out right since the end of last year. I mean, it's not a Q3 2025 thing.
Yeah, and if we go into the Slack groups that we're a part of, and you type in Andromeda in the search, and you look for the oldest post, they go back to sort of like October, November 2024. And I can remember those posts coming out and it being like, oh, what's that? And then nothing really happened and you kind of forget about it. You go through Q4 and Q1 and then this thing pops up again. And it's like, yeah, remember this? Yeah, well, these things actually happened. Meta's always going to be quite closed off about when things actually launched and did that apply to everyone. But the general consensus is things changed in around December 2024 and they've continued to change since then.
Right.
And part of the reason why it's even more popular now is because potentially more people are feeling the impact of it now. And obviously, if you're not spending that much, then potentially you won't feel the impact in December because you'll spend, the impact you feel from the changes is in relation to the amount of spend on the platform. And now potentially after the summer, which is always an interesting time for e-com. Some brands totally win, some brands don't. That's when the push came to shove and people really started to take notice. People are reluctant to change, I think, especially if it's potentially going to mean it costs more.
Right.
You've got to pay more for creative, you've got to bring on more people, more agencies. You're not going to do that straight away. You're going to wait until there's a real big push. So, yeah.
So, I guess, probably lots of brands listening primarily to this could also be media buyers too. When do you need to start worrying about Andromeda or worrying about it, right? I'll put that in scare quotes. And what should people be doing to work within the framework? And I use the term framework because I don't think it is a one-time thing that gets addressed. It's kind of a shift, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, it's a shift in how the advertising should be approached, like, holistically.
Yeah. So first question, when should you start sort of either making changes or taking notice is if you are starting to feel an impact in your performance. And it's potentially that you won't. Your brand is brilliant, your offer is super strong, you've got great product market fit, you've got lots of new product development. You could probably steamroll through all of these changes, especially if your product is well timed for the consumer.
Is
Um,
it a size thing or kind
I
of
think that's
everyone?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question because I think there's a point in a brand's growth on Meta as a channel where, especially in the first few years when you're scaling up, that you can roll through these changes. And I think as soon as your new product development kind of slows down, returning customers start to outweigh new customers, I think that's when you start to feel the impact of these changes a little bit more. And if you are starting to be pinched, what we could call sort of the cost to advertise, so CPM, frequency, cost per reach, you're spending more, you're reaching less people, your frequency's going up, new visitors to the site are going down. Like I like to think about it like a hose pipe and the water's coming out and someone starts to squeeze the hose pipe. If that's what the business feels like, there's just less people on the website, we're getting less new email signups, um, then I would you should have been taking notice of that, 2 months ago, 3 months ago. The second best time to make a change is right now.
That makes sense. We obviously deal with that with clients internally. We have lots of meta clients, so I'd love to, I guess, like break it down into a couple different things. Like one, talk about like smaller brands. Let's say like 7 low 8 figure brands. Like don't have 30 creative agencies involved. For example, like what can and should they be doing within their sort of scope that they have in order to address it, and then you know extrapolate that out to like what is the ideal for brands. Like what does it look like to work within the framework in a completely sort of like optimal scenario.
So that first type of client or first type of brand, you really want to be focusing on consolidation as much as possible. So simplifying the account down. So that's like the media buying tactic. You want to be focusing on how many new people the ads are serving and how many new visitors to the website the account is generating. And then from a creative point of view, you really want to be switching to quality over quantity and diversity over quantity. And that doesn't necessarily mean diversity of message. Your message could be ice pick, but you need to be thinking about diversity in all of the other areas. So format, hook, potentially pain point if you can come at it from different ways, production value, like who's the face in the content, being more diverse in that element as well. But really thinking about it from a quality over quantity. So instead of having a target number of JPEGs that you want to launch every month, 500, bring it right down to 50 and try and make, or even less, and try and make as many different looking ads as possible. And really start to think about it from a audience point of view. So if they're going to see those ads in their feed, we're going to print out all the ads and put them on the wall, and what does that look like? And if it starts to look like wallpaper, they're all the same colour, varying shades of cream, then that's somewhere that you could really make a big change. If all the content looks very different and it all plays well together, just like how you would want to see it if you were receiving those ads in your feed over the course of 2 weeks, 2 months, whatever, that's going to ultimately drive a better experience for the audience, and Meta's going to think about those ads in different ways. And that's the core part of Andromeda, is Meta really hates similar creative, and you'll put yourself into a position where only a small number of ads receive spend. I mean, that's always been a bit of a problem with Meta, sort of like early indicator bias. Meta just goes all in on one
Sure.
ad. But now we know why that is happening now, and that's because of Andromeda, and Meta's got a much smarter brain to analyze these different assets.
So, changing the headline on a static and like calling it a new ad, that's not That's not a new ad. It's probably not even worth launching in the account.
Yeah, we've got some really good clients who are all in on this, and we've got one brand who we make video ads with them, and instead of doing what most people would do, you would default to sort of like making four variations. We just do what's the one video, what's the best hook that we think is going to work, and we're just going to focus on that, move all the crap out of the way, and we're just going to focus on that one ad and try and make the best ad ever, which is a bit more like sort of TV advertising or like a trailer in a movie before a movie. What's the best version of the content that we can produce and focus on that rather than how many different ads can we make.
Right. Yeah. And then, I think the point you make about, and I love the wallpaper analogy, right? Where if you put all of your ads next to each other, do they all look basically the same? If they do, then you don't really have the creative diversity. But also, would love to go more into kind of the placement diversity and thinking about how, and I think this is something that a lot of people don't think about in terms of Meta being an incredibly diverse ecosystem with lots of different types of ad placements and having assets that are made for all of the different sort of placements that Meta can provide.
Yeah, so there's essentially sort of like a matrix, and you could build it like X and Y axes, and it's essentially creative quality, and then I guess you could call format, dimensions, is it square, is it tall, etc. And then you could have almost like aggressiveness of message, and all of that. If you times all of those things together, how many different variations can you create of just one angle? It would probably be, sort of 20, 25 different variations you could make just by looking at those different options that you've got to play with when it comes to sort of actually, creating different types of ads. And if you are feeling the pinch in the cost per advertising, looking at what placements are receiving spend, you've got a Facebook feed, Instagram feed. Sometimes they get grouped together as feeds in the breakdown, but they're totally very different, and also they're changing a hell of a lot. If you think about what Facebook feed used to be like sort of 5-10 years ago, it's actually very different to what it is right now. The audience is very different. Boomers have gotten older. The audience change. Stories used to be sort of grouped together with Reels when both of those placements were launched, or Stories and then Reels was launched. They're both very different. Facebook Reels is definitely a growing platform. And then you've got really undercover placements like Facebook Marketplace, which is if you can get your ads served into that placement, it can be a real sort of foundation of your day-to-day sales. Yeah.
Got Threads now too. Lots of different places. And then obviously the different formats that speak to different people who the same angle would potentially respond to UGC. Some people respond to static assets or carousel assets or, hi-fi sort of high production assets.
Yeah, and you can gamify your feed as well if you want to test this. If you start engaging with a certain type of ad, you will start to receive more of those ads. Even down to a really specific format like a DPA ad in Instagram stories, which sort of appears as these like grid of squares. If you engage with that ad format more, clicking, going to the website, scrolling the website, you'll get more of those ads in that feed. And if you don't tap into these different placements and these different creative types, you're missing that audience. And then that's risk number one. Risk number two is you're leaving the door open for your competitors to serve your audience in that placement, because you're not in that auction then. So it is really important to think about diversity of message, diversity of format, diversity of placement. All of these things to make sure that you are serving your audience and your potential audience where they are, because that's where Meta really wins. Meta really wins when you serve in market, ready to purchase customers. You're essentially retargeting your competitors' audience,
right?
And there has to be a certain amount of strategy to try and do that.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm looking for mattresses, Meta's gonna serve me a lot of other mattress ads, and making sure that I'm receiving the ads that I engage with most, whatever that format is, like making sure that you have that format to reach those people and kind of cover the whole subset of people who are in an action oriented mindset.
And then the one, that's, I guess, the one thing that we didn't touch, which sort of, if we've got all these variations and we've got all these options, this final piece will sort of like times it by 5 or 10, is what page you're serving your ads from. So you've got the brand page, you've got the founder page, it could be like a behind the scenes page. There's a ton of options, even if we just think about sort of brand owned and publicly brand pages. We can then think about sort of brand owned whitelisting, maybe a little bit black hat, so potential review websites or more generic names like Top Golf Gloves, and there's a sort of Top Golf Gadgets, and there's a brand being served from there. And we haven't even spoke about partnerships, taking content, getting it made by a creator or a celebrity or an influencer. The whole scale is there, and getting your ads ran from their page. Yeah, and all of these things together, everything that we spoke about, helps bring down CPM, frequency, cost per reach, and ultimately gets gets the traffic to the website for either the same price as you had it last year or ideally cheaper.
Right. And if there's one thing we know, is that CPMs are always going to be going up. And so anything that can be done to help improve the cost of advertising, the cost of reaching new people, worth doing and worth investing in, especially when you reach a certain scale and it becomes the big issue.
Yeah, and that's when you get to that. We haven't really talked about that, but when you get to that scale, you obviously spoke about sort of smaller brands, but when you get to that scale, it becomes less about what channel drove this sale and more about how do we reach all of our audiences and all of our customers everywhere that they are for as efficiently as possible while driving that growth. And the sort of the mindset has to change a little bit. Obviously, using as many creative partners, it becomes that, what other platforms, AppLovin, Hulu, all of these other things. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's probably a very important point to stress. And I know it comes up with clients who are scaling and scaling aggressively, which is, shifting the sort of locus of focus from channel level performance, campaign level performance, like click-based performance, to a broader, more holistic view, and then using separate tools, holdout tests, MMM, things like that, to get a better understanding of the subsets of that holistic picture, because the one-to-one click to purchase breaks down at scale.
It just doesn't happen as well. If you think about your conversion journey for anything of a decent value, it's not linear. You bounce around like a pinball between these different platforms and these different touch points, and that's essentially what you want as a consumer. You want to build up this reason to buy the product and this justification, and it will be everything that the brand is doing: SMS, email, print. Again,
that gets back to the whole conversation around diversity and of placement, of style, of message. It's not I click on the ad, I buy the thing. It's a much broader way to approach advertising.